The 1960s was a time of panic. The world's future hung in an uncertain balance as developing nations struggled to feed their rapidly growing populations. Paul Ehrlich's 1968 bestseller, The Population Bomb, captured the heart of the problem and shocked the conscience of the world with its visions of a bleak future. With populations in developing nations rising exponentially, the threat of a mass global famine was becoming an impending reality.
Nearly 500 million human beings, 1/7 of the human race, today face the threat of the worst famine this century. 5 million may die of hunger this year, and by the end of the year, there'll be another 12 million mouths to feed.
Across the world, academics urged countries like the United States to make cold and ruthless decisions regarding the distribution of food supplies.
Let's give up on India and Pakistan. It's hopeless. Let them die off. Let's provide our food aid to some countries that have a chance. That was the sentiment.
But this pessimistic attitude was not shared by scientists who believed that the threat of famine could be halted with revolutionary innovations in agriculture. Leading the charge was Dr. Norman Borlaug, an American scientist who had been quietly working for years with new agricultural techniques. Previously, farmers simply planted ordinary seeds which were often unproductive and vulnerable to disease or the elements. Borlaug thought differently. Observing advantageous characteristics in different wheat strains, Borlaug realized that he could create a miracle crop by crossing multiple varieties of wheat. In 1963, Borlaug achieved success. Using groundbreaking agricultural techniques including high-volume crossbreeding and shuttle breeding, Borlaug created the perfect strain. A high-yield, disease-resistant wheat crop. News of the crop's success first spread throughout Mexico, and by 1963, 95% of Mexico's wheat fields grew the high-yield variety. The result was a harvest 6 times larger than the 1943 level, the year Borlaug arrived in Mexico. The country was not only self-sufficient in wheat, it now had grain to export. As the seed traveled across the globe, people everywhere hailed the dawn of the Green Revolution. Within the year, new rice strains from the Philippines and Borlaug's wheat from Mexico traveled to Pakistan, which ordered its first big shipment of seed less than a year after its rival, India, joined the Green Revolution. As both countries increased their agricultural productivity to record levels, many deemed the Green Revolution to be a resounding success. Unfortunately, the miracle wheat that Dr. Borlaug and his colleagues introduced came with a whole host of problems. Because they were expected to produce a high yield, the wheat crops required a dramatic increase in fertilizer applications and irrigation, 2 energy-intensive practices. Without implementing these techniques, yields would have dropped by 1/3, but their use caused severe environmental implications. The revolutionary Haber process used to fix nitrogen and produce the needed fertilizers consumed a substantial amount of highly polluting fossil fuels. Runoff from farms contained high concentrations of fertilizer, contributing to a lack of oxygen in nearby water bodies. The large amounts of water used to farm these high-yielding crops eventually depleted the soil of all its nutrients and led to the abandonment of some of the best farming lands, as well as retreating levels of groundwater in many areas that lacked heavy rainfall to restore it. A lack of biodiversity occurred when farmers only planted the highest-yielding variety, a practice known as monocropping. This depleted the soil's fertility, left the food supply vulnerable to a single disease, and ironically caused a drop in yields as farmers overused their lands. In addition to the environmental impacts, the Green Revolution also caused widespread economic disparity.
In some places, it was very clear that the benefits, as time went on, it was clear that the benefits of the Green Revolution were not even. And so medium income and richer farmers tended to benefit much more than poor farmers or landless peasants.
Because the revolutionary techniques were primarily implemented by prosperous farmers for whom sizable yields had not initially been an issue, many lower-class farmers abandoned their land, often becoming exploited as laborers.
So a high-cost, chemical-intensive agriculture is a recipe for hunger.
Dr. Borlaug responded to such environmental lobbyists, saying that many of them are elitists. If they live just 1 month amid the misery of the developing world as I have for 50 years, they'd be crying out for tractors and fertilizer and irrigation canals. Despite the adverse effects and controversy surrounding the movement, the Green Revolution has remained successful in that it has completed its mission. The world will forever be grateful to the initial successes of the revolution. The new agricultural technologies implemented first in Mexico sparked a far-reaching movement that traversed the globe from South Asia to sub-Saharan Africa. The revolution created an agricultural produce that could keep pace with the exponential increase in population. As the world aged, previously underdeveloped nations became increasingly reliant upon domesticated wheat crops. This catalyzed a second, even more dramatic increase in population that set several key third world nations on the path to second world status, causing a socioeconomic shift. Inspired by the successes of the Green Revolution, developed nations poured resources into agricultural research centers and systems. These centers integrated both science and foreign policy, a combination that was imperative for the success of the revolution. As they were localized, they also allowed for the adaptation of the new technologies which could be implemented in each region. Today, there are 15 such centers that continue to research methods of increasing food production in the future. As the world's population increases at an alarming rate, it is crucial that the Green Revolution evolves to meet our growing needs. Currently, scientists and humanitarians are working towards building a model of sustainable food production in sub-Saharan Africa.
I think sub-Saharan Africa is the main concern at the moment. Sub-Saharan Africa was not able to take advantage of the Green Revolution back in the 60s and 70s because they did not depend as much on wheat and rice as Asia and much of South America. But they didn't have the research system to draw on when their population started to increase.
The Gates and Rockefeller Foundations are trying to ensure that poor farmers have access to quality seeds, those born from the Green Revolution's research, that are best suited to the sub-Saharan climate and soil. Through these programs, they hope to boost farmers' productivity, increase their incomes, and help them lift themselves and their families out of hunger and poverty.
We feel that investments in smallholder agriculture productivity is a sure bet answer for addressing the hunger and food security and poverty problems of sub-Saharan Africa.
In addition to these programs, organizations are addressing the criticisms of the Green Revolution by financing research for a second, sustainable green revolution that does not heavily rely upon fossil fuel usage.
Today, India is capable of producing about 230 million tons of food. But what is going to happen by the year 2020? We need nearly double the food what is produced. So now we have to go through the what is called Green Revolution 2.
This so-called Green Revolution 2 would require the usage of an engineered seed that fits the environment in which it is grown, an improvement from the one-size-fits-all seed of the first revolution. It would also involve returning to more traditional farming methods, including maintaining rich biodiversity, crop rotation, and natural fertilizers. In the final analysis, the Green Revolution was more than just an extraordinary wheat crop. It was representative of the triumph of optimism over cynicism and the marriage of science to global humanitarianism. Countries with previously strained relations were now brought together in collaboration, united in their efforts to improve the lives of all people, not just their own citizens. The agricultural research networks created as part of the revolution emphasized the idea that independent actors, the scientists of the world, could strengthen diplomatic ties and international relations between states. This concept even extended to critics of the Green Revolution. Indeed, environmental groups, small farmers, and economists across the globe formed cohesive networks to highlight the environmental and socioeconomic problems with the movement. Addressing the criticism of the initial revolution, scientists are working on a second, sustainable green revolution that harnesses the collaborative scientific spirit of the first revolution while using agricultural breakthroughs that solve the environmental issues of resource overuse. For the future, pragmatic advances in technology should be tempered by a healthy dose of criticism, allowing the voices of the minority to be heard and ensuring food security for decades to come.